Good afternoon, my name is Penny. This is another video in our Gentle Expansion series, and Gentle Expansion is about our self-development, about extending ourselves in gentle ways with self-care and nurturing. So today I'm going to talk about navigating the family. So this is something that applies to most of us, particularly at this time of the year, having come through Christmas and the end of year holidays, and that is a time where we're often around our family a lot, and January being a time where we're kind of sorting that out, reflecting on it and thinking about how it's affected us and what we might do differently next time with our family, or we're sorting through the triggers that have happened from that situation. And I've heard recently people saying that January was all about the family this year, and that the energies have completely shifted now that we're in February. So to me, this was very pertinent because I was with my family a lot in January, with both sides of my extended family. And so that's interesting to me. And I know one of my friends said the exact same, that she was as well with both sides. So I had my auntie's funeral in Sydney and then on to Adelaide, where I was with my mother's family. So this was two sides of the family, and I was observing the dynamics and the personalities and bonding and strengthening our relationships there and supporting. And I think that's the beauty of the family. The family is a very special thing where we have our connections, our background, our genetics in common, and these can be very special times and relationships with the members of our family. But of course, on the flip side, families can be challenging because they're not so much in our control, or the choice of who is in our family might be in the control of our higher self, our soul, however, not necessarily as a human. So our family can be very different from us. There can be a lot of different personalities and personality clashes that happen between family members, because our family is in part here to challenge us and to help us grow as our higher selves wish to. So our human self might want to really just be really comfortable and avoid conflict, and that is something that is definitely a challenge for me. So I don't like conflict, as many people I know are the same, but sometimes it's hard to avoid in families. And this is something that I just thought of today, something in my teaching for uni that I've been doing. There's a point about expecting conflict in groups. And I thought, well, I could add this to this conversation, because how would our perception change if we kind of expected a bit of conflict? So we didn't get so nervous about that and stressed out by that, but it's just a natural part of human relationships. So let's have a little reflection on that ourselves, and just think, well, what if I just expected a bit of conflict and didn't make a big deal out of it, and it's inevitable when people are together? Because I think to avoid these family relationships and situations, we're kind of missing out at the same time. So it's tough, because I often have the instinct to avoid these situations where conflict could occur, but then we're not having the relationships and we're not strengthening those. So if we leave too long between seeing family members, it's possible that those relationships won't really continue, or not to the closeness that we might like. So it is an inevitable part of navigating our lives that we are in contact with family and extended family. So there are a few points that I want to talk about today, and an important one is boundaries. So I have been around people recently who have had issues with this, and I've had to set some boundaries myself, and this is something that is not always easy in any context, but particularly with family, because we know we're going to be with our family in the future, and we want to avoid hurting feelings and having conflict often. So we might neglect to have those same boundaries for our own well-being. And I had someone say to me, well, I wouldn't accept this from anyone outside of my family, but because this person's in my family, I accept a lot more. And I think that made me think about it, because it's so important that we ensure our well-being and that we're treated with respect. So regardless of who that person is. And I think just because someone's in our family, it doesn't mean we need to be treated badly by them. So it's okay to have some distance or set some boundaries in those cases. And sometimes this happens, that people have lack of contact for a long time, and that's sometimes needs to be done. So unfortunately, but if we are able to have those boundaries, it might assist the other person to look at their behaviour and consider behaving a different way if they want to be in a relationship with us. I think that goes for every type of relationship. We need to have certain standards of what's okay and what I would like to experience. So I had that situation and I just thought, this is what I'd like to experience. I wouldn't like to experience what that person is drawing me into. So I said, no, I'm going to walk away because I'm not going to accept this experience at the moment. And I think that is important. We need to look at those things and think about, what do I accept? What's my line? And what kind of energy do I want to be around? Because sometimes people are just not in a good space and they're not bringing a positive energy. And sometimes, if that's the case, we can't necessarily help them, but we can help ourselves and be in a good space ourselves and keep our energy as clean as we can. So moving on to triggers, it's natural that family members will trigger us in certain ways. I don't really like the word trigger, but it's hard to find a word to replace it actually. So at the moment, that's what I'm using. So when we feel upset by something that somebody does or says, or the way they behave towards us. So although we should have boundaries about these things, it's also important to look at how we might be contributing to this behaviour as well. So my philosophy is that extreme self-responsibility is the most powerful thing that we can have. So to realise that the experiences that we're experiencing are often telling us something about us, about things that we need to still work on. So if someone is upsetting us in some way, we need to kind of reflect and think, well, what is this telling me about how I feel about myself? The fact that that's happening and that that's upsetting me, because when we're in a really good place, we might be able to feel okay regardless of the way somebody is behaving. But to have radical self-responsibility is to accept that we're responsible for our experience going forward. So we can look at that and say, is there some way that I'm not fully accepting myself or loving myself? And is that why that comment is upsetting me in that way? It doesn't mean that we should excuse the other person's behaviour, but we can look at any needs that we have. And I think that's our responsibility, to have extreme self-care and consider our own self-development and how we can be a more whole and integrated person in the process of engaging in relationships and in general. So that's another point. I would like to also talk about empathy. So there are differences between people, and sometimes we just need to accept that that person is maybe never going to see eye to eye with us. They might be just a little bit different in the way they behave or the way they think or see the world around them, their reality. And to understand that rather than to judge that is probably the best way to go. We're all doing the best we can with where we are. So I'm not saying that that person has to be in your life if that's not healthy, so we have those boundaries, but in general situations, the more we can understand others, the more we know what to do as far as how much time to spend with them, how much to allow them space, or the way to behave around them so that the relationship is as healthy as it can be. So there's always a way that we can look through other people's eyes and just realise, this is what this person's going through. They're doing the best they can. Maybe that's not an energy I want to be around, but I still care and I still love them and have empathy for them as a person for what they're going through. I'm sorry that they're going through that. So we can't always help. Sometimes we can be support for people, but sometimes they're not allowing that. They're on their path, and we have to allow them to make their mistakes and choose the supports that they want to have. It's not up to us to save people against their will. Everybody's on their path and they need to work out how to also become a whole and integrated person and a happier person. And that can take time. We can't say how long that will take for each person, and in every different aspect and in different times of our lives. So that's just another thought, to try to lead with empathy and understanding and curiosity about people rather than judgment and blame of others. So leading on from empathy, I've included forgiveness as one of the points. Now, this is just something I feel very passionate about, because a lot of people feel that forgiveness is just something that we can just do. I need to forgive people. And I feel that forgiveness is sort of the last step. So forgiveness happens organically, I believe, when we have allowed our own needs to be met first, when we have allowed ourselves to feel whatever hurt or pain that we have experienced from whoever we need to forgive. We first need to love ourselves, accept ourselves and forgive ourselves, and have compassion for whatever pain that we're experiencing before we even think about the other person. I really believe that there's no other way to do this, because if we jump straight to compassion and forgiveness for others without even thinking about ourselves, often we just feel more angry, we feel more resentful and unheard and unheld. But if we can support ourselves first to say, look, I need to heal, and it's okay to be angry and to be hurt, and I need to work through those things first and grow to love myself and hold myself and reparent myself the best I can. And then I think once we see through those eyes of love, once we feel loved by ourselves, so that's that radical self-responsibility where we know that we can't rely on anyone necessarily to fulfill our needs, but we can definitely rely on ourselves once we learn to do that and we have those strategies. So once we've done that, I believe, feeling completely loved and accepted, it will be natural for us to feel that way towards others. So that forgiveness will come organically. It's not something we can force. So once we're taken care of, we'll just naturally want other people to be forgiven and loved, and we will just have more compassion for everybody around us once we have developed that compassion for ourselves. I think just often we go about it the opposite way, where we blame ourselves or we don't really take care of our needs to the extent that we need to. I think this is how we have grown up, that it's all about being a nice person, a good person, forgiving and loving, and I think most people don't realise to what extent we need to accept ourselves and fully love ourselves and nurture ourselves. Because if we don't, we're just like that wounded child that is still searching for someone to love him or her, and that can go on through adulthood if we don't take charge of that and really embrace that. But when we do, our whole life can change. My life is changing. I'm working on this all the time. I believe I'm embodying this now. Self-care first, self-love first, nurturing, compassion for self in every moment. What am I feeling? Why am I being triggered? Why do I feel resentful or envious? Why do I feel neglected? In what way can I meet those needs? And once we've fully met those needs, and that's become a priority in every moment of every day of our lives, we just have so much more to give to others, and we have so much more patience, compassion, forgiveness, love. And yeah, I truly, truly believe this. I'm experiencing this, and we have only a certain amount of energy when we're not loved. So the more we can feel ourselves, the more energy we have to give that out to others. So the family can be a beautiful thing, but it can be a very challenging space to navigate. I've had a lot of experiences lately, as I said, with different family members that are possibly on a slightly different page in a lot of areas to me, and perhaps we're just very different and they'll never completely understand me and vice versa, and sometimes we just have to accept that. We just choose also the people we want to be around, that we have things in common with, our family of choice, our soul family, that is our friends and people in our immediate orbit that we really connect with. And fostering those relationships above all will really enhance our happiness, I think, and our lives, and that's where we can place our focus, rather than always feeling that when we're failing with a family. We just work on ourselves, allow others to work on themselves rather than expecting them to behave a certain way, have our boundaries, have our limits to what we're going to accept, but take radical self-responsibility for the way we feel in every situation. Try to choose situations that are healthy for all parties and embrace family gatherings. Try to look for the good and the positive and go from there. So until next time, I'll say goodbye.